Today is Mr. Dilip Joe, MD and CEO of Manipal Health Enterprises Limited. Welcome to the show, Dilip.
My pleasure.
How did you come into healthcare? Was it by choice, a conscious choice?
No, it was accidental.
Healthcare can be very daunting for somebody who is not a clinician. How did you handle that pressure in the early years of your career?
When I came to healthcare in 2002, was not really known for professional managers. People those days used to talk about FMCT and telecom over the upcoming months. Healthcare never really featured in any conversation. It's a difficult environment, and particularly for somebody who has come from no background. A lot of the time people assumed I was a doctor. I was introduced as head of this hospital, the personnel manager of this hospital. They sort of call me Dr. Dilip Joe. And oftentimes I have to say, no, I'm not a doctor.
A lot of this explosive growth has come in the last 4 years. Is it decades of hard work culminating into the outcomes that we see today, or what are the other drivers of this explosive growth?
Decades of work culminating and people getting more comfort and confidence about the ability of the team to manage geographical challenges and all that. The second, availability of capital, that financial sponsors are willing to return you significantly more in the last decades or so.
And there is also a difference in strategy among the larger chains when it comes to opening new markets. Expanded beyond these metros to smaller cities as well. But there is another school of thought. The third largest chain probably is only concentrated around metros. Which side of this debate are you on?
We cannot ignore the story of the tier 2, tier 3. There is affordability. You're right about the ability to price higher, build a legacy for yourself in terms of customers who would stick to you. Your challenges are different. In a metro, you would find doctors, find managers, find nurses. When you go to a tier 2, tier 3, your challenge is not really putting the infrastructure, finding people to come and work there. The good thing is, when you are a large network, you have the ability to move people around.
What's your differentiated USP that helps you stand out compared to other hospital chains?
So to my mind, the differentiator would have to be the softer side of the hospital. That what is the experience they feel in the hospital outside of the clinical paradigm.
Dilip, we have also seen that some of your peers a very diversified revenue stream. Outside running multi-specialty hospitals, they are practically trying to capture a much larger pie of all ancillary revenue streams that are possible, be it diagnostic, be it pharmacies, be it home care. What's your take on that?
The skill sets that you need to run these different verticals, to my mind, are very different. Diagnostics are quite a lot about logistics. A lot of the time it is about how efficient you are in your collection, diagnostic and reporting back. As Manipal, we believe we are good in our clinical areas. We give good clinical outcomes. We are focused on tertiary and quaternary care. And like you said, there is enough to do in this. And then if there is enough headroom, you are able to get a 15-18% kind of a growth, then that's a good path to be into.
Let's double click on this point. If manpower is the, let's say, recurring cost line item, one would assume that your input cost, the raw material, is actually humans. As you aggressively scale, as the industry also becomes organized, do you think we have built enough capacity on the education pipeline side to support this rapid expansion growth of the provider?
But the point there is that the rural-urban skew that we talked about earlier. In cities, you will find your doctors and your nurses. When you want to go to a tier 3, like I mentioned earlier, that's where you would find that, it is difficult to attract people. So therefore, at an macro level, we are certainly short-staffed, in terms of skill set. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses. But as an individual hospital, does Manipal face that challenge? No, because we do attract doctors, we do attract nurses. The challenges would be for people in tier 2, tier 3, maybe standalone hospitals. It's not a challenge maybe not for Manipal, not for any of the large organized players, but for the sector it's a challenge.
Hi viewers, I'm Vivek Sinha, the founder and CEO of Emversity, and I welcome you all to this healthcare-focused podcast series, The Prognosis. So the idea behind launching this podcast was to help create next generation of leaders for the healthcare industry. And we thought, what could be a better way to do this than let leaders of today groom leaders of tomorrow? So in each episode in the podcast, we'll be talking to a top CEO or an entrepreneur from the healthcare industry. So if you're an industry professional or a clinician or an entrepreneur building for the healthcare industry, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is brought to you by the Emversity team. We are a training and recruitment platform for the healthcare industry. We do two things in service of our mission, which is to address the global shortage of doctors, nurses, and allied healthcare workers. First, we run work-integrated degrees and diploma programs, which are curated along with the top healthcare companies and NACA plus universities. And second, we also run an online jobs marketplace called Resume with an RX. Now, Resume is a portal which is a 10 times smarter way of getting hired by a top healthcare company in India. All right, let's dive right in. Welcome to another episode of The Prognosis. Joining me on the podcast today is Mr. Dilip Joe, MD and CEO of Manipal Health Enterprises Limited. It's the largest hospital chain in the country now with over 10,000 beds and practically a pan-India presence. And of course, the group is backed by Temasek, TPG, and the legendary entrepreneur, Dr. Anjan Pai. So welcome to the show, Dilip.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure, sir. Why don't we start by learning more about you? Of course, what Manipal is doing has been widely covered in the media, but we would like to understand your backstory as well.
So where would you like to start?
Let's start from the beginning. We would love to understand the formative years of your career, your upbringing, the value systems that shaped you into who you are today.
So I was born in Kerala, a small town called Patte. Small town those days, it's grown now. So in 1966, sounds many decades back, and it is many decades back. I'm the eldest of three children, and studied till my graduation in Kerala. Did my BSc in physics, then appeared for a national entrance exam, for American course. I studied in IRMA in Anand, the Institute of Rural Management in Anand. I joined there in 87 and passed out in 89. Got recruited from the campus into a finance job with National Dairy Development Board. I was in project appraisals and financing. NDDB, if you are familiar with it, was doing Operation Flood financing. Financing institutions like Amul and Nandini, Karnataka, Milmai, Kerala, those cooperative structure was getting financed by NDDB those days. Operation Flood 3 was in vogue, and I joined the project finance team, and that's where I started my career in finance. In 1989 May is when I started my career.
How did you come into healthcare? Was it by choice, a conscious choice, or was it accidental?
It was accidental. Healthcare those days, when I came to healthcare in 2002, was not really known for professional managers.
Probably Apollo was the only corporate chain.
That's right. And the Fortis was, and Wokat was there, Fortis were there, so it was, they were more of regional chains of those days, and Apollo was really a pan-India chain. And, number of professional managers were few, and you haven't really come across many people who have chosen that I would want to be in healthcare. That, people those days used to talk about, FMCG and telecom were the upcoming ones. And, maybe financial sector, healthcare never really featured in any conversation. Even when we were being placed in the campus, there were no healthcare company in the campus. So, like I said, I started working in 1989. Till 96, I was in NDDB, in the corporate office in Anand, a very beautiful small town. Then I joined Vadilal Industries in Ahmedabad, which was in food processing, ice creams and food processing, a nice little company. Again, in corporate finance, and corporate planning, management services is what I sort of looked at. That was in 96, and I was there till 2002. In 2002, I was leaving. I decided to leave Vadilal. I had a couple of options. I was looking at option from a pharmaceutical company in a finance job that, I was offered the position of general manager of finance in a large pharmaceutical company, and I was considering that when this healthcare option came along. This was from a medical college in a place called Karamsad, known for as a Sardar Patel's birthplace, Karamsad in near Anand in Gujarat. And that's a very good medical college, and H.M. Patel Center for Medical Care and Education. A trust hospital, a large educational institution, we had 100 seats MBBS. Now it will become 150. All postgraduate subjects, nursing, physiotherapy, masters and bachelors, all in a beautiful 100-acre campus. It has come up through the donations from the society. It was purely run in a charitable mode. And someone I knew very well approached me with a job to run the teaching hospital in that medical college. That, it's a 550-bedded teaching hospital. And the only connection I had with that hospital was that, a couple of years prior to that, I have been to that hospital for a minor procedure on my toe. That, I had an ingrown toenail and I had gone there for a surgery. And, I've seen this hospital, and I had a close friend, 1 year senior from me, from Irma, actually working there with the trust that was running the hospital. So I told him, look, I don't know anything about hospitals, and I did have this other job. But then we thought it's an opportunity to work in a new sector, and I had the opportunity to head that hospital. If I had continued in finance, I had gone on to become maybe a CFO at some point of time. That job at hand that time was general manager finance in that company that I talked about, a pharmaceutical company. But this had a much wider gamut of stuff to do. And obviously, I knew nothing about hospitals, and that is how I went and picked it up. The reason is that, I was maybe 30 odd years of age at that time, and you felt if you had to take a chance with something new, a new career, this is the time you can still do it and come back to your original track if it did not work out. So that's how it was accident, and but yeah, it worked. Now looking back after 20 years, it turned out to be all right.
Yeah, so that decision of taking a bet on that new role has actually worked out.
Yeah.
Healthcare can be very daunting for somebody who is not a clinician,
Yes.
and because there are regulations, there are lives involved.
Yes.
How did you handle that pressure in the early years of your career?
Yeah, it is very true, Vic. What you're saying is very true. You don't come across vulnerable, clientele, customers, patients, whatever you would want to say in most other career that you would choose. In this hospital, for example, like I said, it was a rural medical college. It's a rural medical college. Bulk of our patients could not afford, treatment. A lot of free ships were given. The bulk of our patients were from small villages, agriculture families, and for them, going to a hospital is sort of the last resort because you are giving up a day's earning. You are inconveniencing the family, so they sort of come to you when not when they ought to have come, when things have gone a little bad. When their own local doctors or their own self-healing stuff has not worked. So it's a difficult environment, and particularly for somebody who has come from no background, to come into that is difficult. But I think the team helped, the doctor that, for me, it was an opportunity to interact with a lot of doctors, nurses, medical students who are attached to the teaching hospital. All the postgraduates are typically posted in the hospital, like you sort of learned from them. You sort of understood nuances of what a clinician goes through. I'd taken parts in grand rounds of doctors in the hospital. I've sat through mortality morbidity meetings by choice. It was an opportunity to learn. I've sat through demo boards. I continue to do that in subsequent jobs also. So maybe it required some amount of education in terms of picking up the context. But I think the underlying managerial philosophy that, whether you are in healthcare or somewhere else, I think those are fairly similar. That, I believe healthcare is all about teams. That, I can't think of, anything which is more about teams that healthcare is. That, it's not all, people think always it is the doctor, doctor who did the surgery, did the procedure. But the role that the nurses play, the role that everybody else in the hospital plays, to get a patient well and home, it is truly remarkable how things come together. So I think it teaches you a lot, and it certainly teaches you humility. That because healthcare has got no rich or poor in that. You have seen people with any amount of money that they can spend, succumb to an illness which could not be handled, and so it is a great leveler. And you see raw people, you see raw situations, you see raw society. It's a learning experience.
Absolutely. And Dilip, a lot of our viewers are people aspiring to build their careers in healthcare. Now the industry looks very different. It's professionalized to a great extent because of FDI flowing in, private equity players taking a lot of bet, and that has also led to the emergence of generalists and professional CEOs who are not necessarily clinicians. But in the era when you started your career, being a generalist, I'm assuming would have been a handicap because most of these healthcare providers were run by promoters who were clinicians themselves.
Absolutely.
So, in the initial days, how did you build trust? How did you build credibility with your stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a great question, Vivek. I sort of mull over it every now and then, particularly when I chat with my colleagues these days. A lot of the time people assumed I was a doctor, because when I was introduced as, head of this hospital, the general manager of this hospital, they sort of call me Dr. Dilip Joe. That is, they assumed because, I was a doctor. And oftentimes I have to say, no, I'm not a doctor. And, then what are you? Is sometimes spoken, sometimes unspoken kind of a question. I think the building credibility with the doctors, what you talked about, is very crucial. Because they have to feel, it is a knowledge sector, it is a skill sector, and everybody, all the doctors are aware of what they contribute to the well-being of an individual. So the society views them a little differently. Maybe a few decades ago, we used to talk about doctors being looked upon as gods. So they always have an aura, and so therefore it is important that you work with them, where you also bring to the table what is that you are contributing to the conversation, contributing to the situation, or contributing to make them do well. So I think listening is a great skill to have. When you deal with doctors, listening is a great skill to have. Not only when you deal with doctors, any manager that I would. If you were to ask me, what is one piece of advice I would give to an upcoming healthcare manager or any manager, is that, please listen. Because oftentimes what the person on the other side across the table requires is a patient hearing. That, understanding the context he or she is coming from. They may not expect a solution, but they could expect empathy. They could expect understanding of what they are going through. And secondly, while you being a doctor is perhaps more, gives you more comfort or gives them more comfort that they can relate to you, but that may not come in the way that, for example, if I'm a MBBS doctor and a super specialist is talking to me about, say, neurosurgery, there is very little intelligent conversation that I can have on that subspecialty. So therefore, I don't think the doctors are trying to, when you are talking to a CEO who's a doctor, they are not really looking for medical input. This is the patient I have, what should I do? That is not the conversation. I doubt if that's the conversation even with a doctor CEO. I pretty much, I'm sure that's not. Therefore, if you remove the need of you being a fellow professional in that conversation, then, anybody can be a hospital CEO. I think, therefore, the fundamentals that you need is the competencies of a good manager, whether you are a CEO of a hospital or a CEO of a manufacturing company. I think the competence that you have, the skill set that you should have, and more than that, the attitude that you should have, I think those are the key drivers. And to me, this is my 20th year as a hospital manager. I have never felt gap ever that, I'm not a doctor, so therefore I'm not able to handle a situation or deal with the situation.
Let's move on from the formative years at that hospital school to the next few stints that you did. Fortis, I believe, was your next.
Yeah, I actually joined VOCA. I worked with Vishal. Vishal Lali was my boss when I joined VOCA. That was in 2006. I had spent nearly 5 years in that job in Gujarat in the medical college. And I was planning to move to South. I'm originally, like I said, originally from South, and parents were in Kerala. They're still in Kerala. And, an opportunity in South was something, a geographical fit also would have suited. Then I came across this profile requirement that time was with Hoka. It was a position called General Manager Operations, working with Vishal, it was part of Vishal's immediate team. And we had a video conference kind of an interview. That was the first ever interview of that.
This was which year?
This was in 2006. And, I was in Anand, like I said, Anand, where Amul is there.
Gujarat, yeah. Yeah.
And we didn't have, those days we had to go to a video conferencing place, you get an appointment and, go there to get this done. I had to drive to Baroda, which is a 40-kilometer town, about 40 kilometers away. So Vishal's office, you have to book both sides, you have to go to a particular place and sit. Vishal's office had arranged this slot in Baroda. He was in Bangalore. We had a conversation, and we had a follow-up meeting in Mumbai in the workout office, and then I was offered this job. So that was the next job after this, in the corporate healthcare. And again, it was a formative years. For me, it was my 6th year into healthcare, where I spent maybe 12, 13 years prior to that in finance functions, but it was my 5th or 6th year into healthcare. I think those early years in the corporate environment really helped shape me, and in terms of people that I worked with, the learnings that I've had. But I keep telling everybody, I'm deeply grateful for that initial 5 years I had in the academic medical institution. I think that really formed my views about healthcare. Gave me a lot of thoughts about how healthcare ought to be. You don't come across that environment in a corporate, in a corporate facility, in a corporate, healthcare company. I think I'm deeply grateful for that initial stint where I learned a lot about medicine, about the doctors, nurses. Being in a campus where these people are educated also helped me understand them a little better. I think I'm a better manager for that.
And you became a part of Fortis after the acquisition.
That's right. In 2009 December, or around that time is when we were acquired. So yeah, we went through that, and I moved into an operating role after that. I was a regional director for South for Fortis. I also looked after East for some time, so I'm familiar with South and East. In that part of my career, that I worked in Calcutta and Bangalore. Then I left Fortis in 2013 to join Care. Care was then just taken over by Advent, the first control deal that the country had seen in healthcare. Advent owned over 80% approximately that time, and I went in as a CEO.
Brought in by the investors.
That's right. Advent brought me in, and again a great experience. I went in with a lot of concerns about private equity, first exposure to private equities. A lot of people tried to tell me, look, it'll be a difficult environment. They are completely different animals, so to speak, but none of that sort of played out like that. I had a great time with Advent, great time in Care.
From operator, you moved to a private equity, TPG. That was an advisory role, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was there in Care for 4 years, close to 4 years. I exited when Advent exited. They sold the asset to the next entity. I gave a 6 months handover, and I joined TPG as senior advisor for healthcare, TPG Capital, and essentially working on Manipal. TPG was investors in Manipal that time from their earlier fund. I was therefore placed in Manipal, mostly associated with Manipal. As I was in that role for about 15 months. Then I took over in 2017, end of October is when I took over as the CEO of Manipal. Now, just over 7 years.
So you have worked in Wockhardt, which for a very long period of time was a promoter-controlled company, and then you have seen the other side as well, large healthcare systems controlled by private equity. And as you rightly said, in the initial days, there were a lot of concerns that people had about private equity literally owning the healthcare infrastructure in India. But what is often less talked about is the fact that because of this investment flowing in, the country has been able to build infrastructure at a rapid pace, plus also remove inefficiencies. Why don't you contrast the two stints that you had, the promoter controlled stints as well as the private equity stints, and what do you see? Why don't you educate our viewers about the value that this money flowing in the healthcare ecosystem has added?
So first of all, there are similarities between the two in the sense that, a promoter controlled company also would want the entity to do well, grow, give a return on investment. So those financial expectations, are similar. The depth of that could be different, but the directions are similar. A promoter could have a longer term, window to look at an asset, would maybe able to maybe take some riskier calls, all that is possible. But the outside in learning that private equity brings, from their global experience or experience in similar situations elsewhere, I think that is something which is very unlikely to happen in a promoter. I'm not talking about promoter as a negative context. I'm just saying in a company where there is no private equity influences is there. I think private equity bring in learning, they bring in best practices, they could bring in competencies from adjacencies. I think it sharpens you as a manager in terms of the performance orientation, in terms of having a plan B, a plan C, and execution focus. I think I'm not saying these are not there in a non-PE environment. I think it's about the sharpness of the focus, makes a difference. Particularly if PEs have a shorter window, financial sponsors got a shorter window to achieve certain kind of results, which maybe a owner could make a few years more. So that's a sharpness that you sort of learn as a manager. I think I have had now experience with multiple financial sponsors. There is none that I regret. There is none that I have not learned from. I think all of them been enriching experience. You're friends with everybody. That why people would have come, worked, and moved on. We keep in touch. We interact in matters related to healthcare and otherwise. We remain friends. And I think it's a great bunch of people. And like you said, Vivek, that what the financial sponsors have done for healthcare in India is tremendous. That if you look at the capacity creation, which have happened, across the country, very, very many thousand beds, the technology enhancements which have happened, the process improvements, maybe bring in learnings from adjacency, like I said, digitalization, bringing in online kind of interfaces, CRM kind of initiatives, all these. I think oftentimes one could think otherwise that, this is really not applicable to healthcare. Healthcare is different. Healthcare would be different, maybe different, but, you can absorb technology, absorb processes, absorb best practices from other sectors. I think those things have been, done a lot by the financial sponsors. I think it's been India should be grateful to that.
And what the aspect that is not as appreciated as it should be is that when private equity comes into play and addresses these inefficiency, ultimately it's the consumer that wins because the cost benefit is passed on to the consumer. I think we are still one of the most affordable quality healthcare system in this part of the world.
And we are one of the rare countries where cost of certain procedures have gone down year after year. Look at what a cardiac surgery did cost maybe 10 years back or 20 years back. Yeah, and what does it become now? I think certainly that it benefits the patients eventually. It also sharpens the skill sets of hospitals. That things that maybe somebody was not doing. If a third party were to come and probe, would you not move up the value chain in terms of the clinical offerings? Would you not, sort of enhance our services that you give to patients, enhance the number of procedures that you are doing, or complexity of the procedures that you are doing? You begin to think about it. There are enough patients in the country for a secondary care hospital to sit back and continue to be secondary care. That because we have 150 crore people. That so there would be demand at each point of the spectrum of care, primary to quaternary. So you could, as a hospital, sit back as a secondary care hospital or a primary care hospital and still do financially well because there is a demand pool out there. But then prompt to move to do more things, complex things, enhance skill sets, do stuff that helps people not to go abroad. All that is something that you begin to think when you have these comparisons, when you have this external stimuli which comes in. I think it's good to have that.
Absolutely. So now we already know how your association with Manipal started.
Yeah.
At what point of time did you decide that you should come to Manipal full time and be on the driving seat?
I think it was an offer made to me, like I said, in 2017. I was, like I said, I was already familiar with Manipal, being an advisor to Manipal. I was with DBD, but also senior advisor to Manipal. That was my role at that time. I was familiar with the operations, and when this offer was made to me towards the end of 2017, it was very natural because I was stationed primarily in Manipal, and I had the benefit of knowing the system, which another CEO would not have had. He or she would have to learn about the company from scratch. I think, it gave that little bit of an advantage. And, I felt this is the most natural transition. So, yeah.
When you joined Manipal, Manipal was different, although in terms of people on the cap table, it's pretty much continuity. TPG, Temasek, and Dr. Ranjan Pai.
Yeah.
But the holding was very different. It
Yeah.
was still a promoter-controlled company. When you took your first steps in the company, what are the few things that you did to succeed in a promoter-led company, a promoter who owns a large share, let's say, stake in the company, and the promoter who has built the company with over 2 decades giving blood and sweat? How was it different working with let's say institutional owned company versus a promoter led company?
So one great thing about the whole Manipal group is Dr. Rajit Pai, not like a typical promoter.
So he was not very actively in a executive role.
He believed in ownership and management being different. Even the other day, just a few days ago, we were together having a conversation with the third party, and again he articulated the point that ownership and management ought to be different. Ownership should provide capital, set boundaries, set expectations, and find a professional team to run the business for you. And that's how he has run all his company. Even today, if you look at his group, every company is run by a professional CEO with a separate board, and he's not the chairman of any of the companies that he owns in majority. I think that is a big difference. That you have great comfort working with a promoter investor like that. You could debate with him about the growth plans. It is not that he said so, therefore it had to get done. You could debate with him. You could argue out a point. You're open to your point of view. I think it's a bit difference. I think so. Therefore, I never ever felt that I'm working with a promoter. That was never an issue then. And never, so for me, whether he owns 60% or 30% today, it's no different because I would still talk to him about the future of the company. He would still give the inputs like he used to give those days. I don't think that majority or minority makes a difference.
That's actually a great takeaway for promoters on how to separate ownership with management and how to operate with a professional CEO once they take that step.
Yeah.
Now, let me flip the question for you. What would be the advice that you would give to a young CEO who is just walking into a company where, or let's say taking the control of the operating side from a promoter?
Yeah. One is that if the do it gradually. I'm just saying, as a CEO, please always assume you are in it for the long run. So you don't have to demonstrate anything in the first month or first 3 months or first 6 months. If you have been selected as a CEO, it is because there is conviction by the people who selected you, the board which selected you, that you are the right person, you are the right skill sets, and they would want to bet on you. So you do have, unless it is a turnaround situation, you are there to sort of rescue a sinking ship. There maybe there is an issue with the time. Otherwise, there is time for you to really find your bearings, about a company. You don't have to be quick to judge or find the solution. Is my view. This is my second stint as a CEO. I was CEO of Care, and there also I took over actually from a promoter who was a chairman. Dr. Samaraju was the original promoter of Care, and while he sold majority to Advent, he remained as executive chairman. And he was the MD and chairman. I was the CEO, and I was answerable, for the performance of the company. So it's about working. I would only contrast with that. I'll sort of walk the talk with that experience. That I spent time with Dr. Samaraju to understand his ethos, why he set up the company, what is that he think that we should go on to do, and then how does that get married to the objectives of the financial sponsor. I think, first of all, if you have become a CEO, your competence, or in your mind, you should be confident of your competence. That you have an external validation. That it is not only you think you are competent, that people around you think you are competent to become a CEO. So therefore, you have time to do a good job. And my first advice, like I'm repeating myself, saying that please look at yourself as a long-term player. That do the right things, and then sometimes if you are trying to do stuff overnight, we might end up doing shortcuts, which may not really work out in the long run. I think give yourself time and learn from the company, learn from your predecessor, learn from your colleagues, and then assess what you need to do, and maybe run your assessment past a few people. I'm saying, it is always good to go back to the board and say, look, I spent 3 months. This is what I think needs to be done. What are your views? Get a buy-in, and and then go out and execute. I think systematically look at it. I don't think anybody is looking at you delivering overnight. Anything dramatic happening. You do have time. That's something I would want to say.
I loved the way how you framed it, because one aspect of leadership advice, which is often not written, but most advisors tell people that when you walk into a new role, take over from the promoter. For example, even although in my case the founder was a very young guy and fairly involved as well, but the advice that I got early on is that show some quick wins. Otherwise, you will be seen as the guy who does the thinking and talking, but not the doing. And many executives fall into that trap. How should an executive maneuver it? Do informal setups, discussions, or how would you go about that trust building with the promoter and alignment?
I think conversations, engaging, keep engaging, keep spending time, keep sounding them out on your ideas, your thoughts, because please always understand. I think I would tell an incoming CEO, please understand there's a repository of knowledge sitting out there, and which you don't have the benefit of that. There is institutional memory. There is a repository of the entire knowledge is there. Maybe with a few people that, you spending time with them is getting you the context, also helping you understand what might have, gone differently, putting yourself in their shoes to see what you would have, done differently. So spend a few months. I'm just saying you do have a settling down time. I understand with the point that you made about quick wins. But then if you set your expectations right upfront, look, I'm not going to deliver quick wins. You could go out and say that, look, please don't expect quick wins. I would want to think over. I would want to spend time understanding. Then I would want to come back with a plan that this is how I'm thinking about the next 3 years. Take your inputs and go and execute. Set the expectations right. And I think that's one thing I did with money. That in my first board meeting, I I told the board, look, I have the familiarity of the last 15 months, having seen the company at close quarters, but still in this role, I do have a few thoughts. Allow me a couple of months to come back with what I would want to do, how I am thinking about it. I would want your inputs, and then we will go and execute the plan. So that's what I did, and the board had one or two suggestions. I said, okay, this is the plan that I am freezing. We are all aligned to it, and this is how we would measure it over the next 3 to 5 years. This is how the success of the plan would be visible, from a financial statement or from a quality report or whatever. And that is how we would measure it. And that is, I think that helps, setting expectation. Oftentimes you are putting pressure on yourself, thinking that I need to win tomorrow, I need to turn EBITDA positive in 2 months. Oftentimes the pressure is self-created, is what I would think. I could be grossly wrong because I've not worked in the startup environment. The pressure there are different. Timelines or priorities of investors could be different, which could put pressure on you. But I think as a CEO, you do have the latitude to set the timelines. And it is a good skill to have, to set expectations that, what is that you would deliver. Not to overpromise, but, not to overpromise to get into a job. Be realistic about what you want to do. I think under-promising and over-delivering, is something that you should think about it.
So Dilip, you made a great point about not over-promising, but that does not by any means under-delivering. So just to help our viewers understand the context better, why don't you compare what was the scale and span of Manipal the day you took over, and what is the scale and span today?
While we don't normally talk about the scale in terms of revenue, let me give a comparison in terms of beds, or number of hospitals. We were about 12 hospitals or so. There we are 37 hospitals now. We were about 4,000 odd beds. Then we are close to 11,000 beds now, and we see about 80 lakh patients in our network today. And compared to about 28 lakhs those days. So scale has dramatically changed, and complexity of the work that we do has changed. The geographical spread, like you said originally, it has changed. All these add more challenges when you run a network across. Now we are there in all parts, so all the regions of the country. And while we look at India as a nation, that we have 4 regions with a lot of peculiarities. Maybe states got its own peculiarities. So getting into a new geography, adjusting to the ground realities there, and still ensuring that the ethos that should put the institution together is not diluted. I think those are the challenges as you expand. So therefore, you would see that there are iconic institutions which are located in one city, and you don't find 4 of them in the country. 4 branches of them in the country. So scale has dramatically changed, but the challenge always is to ensure that what we stand for does not get diluted in the quest of this expansion.
And Dilip, a lot of this explosive growth has come in the last 4 years, and that's not just true only for Manipal, but even for other chains like Narayana, etc. Yeah. Is it decades of hard work culminating into the outcomes that we see today, or what are the other drivers of this explosive growth in the last 4 years?
It's in part the decades of work culminating, and people getting more comfort and confidence about the ability of the team to, like I said, manage geographical challenges and all that. The second one is about the availability of capital, that financial sponsors are willing to return you. That I think that was really proportionately significantly more in the last decade or so. Then the demand for corporate healthcare also, that it is It is really, people are aware of the difference that a corporate provider has in terms of outcomes, the service. Then the spread into tier 2, tier 3 kind of locations. Earlier corporate hospitals were primarily in the metros. Now you have it state capitals and tier 2, tier 3 towns. So I think these facets, and there's a demand pull which is happening. I think this is driving this expansion. The earlier issue also was that constructing a hospital is all right. You could go anywhere and construct. But then getting the people to man it, doctors, managers, I think that was again a challenge. I think 2 or 3 things, these things sort of coming together to solutions in the last decade or so, and that is driving, I would think, this expansion.
Sure. And a gap that you have been able to fill in the last 4 years is now probably you have a real pan-India presence. I mean, until 4 years ago, you were absent in the major markets like the East, Hyderabad, Bombay. And I think that Bombay gap has also been filled a month ago. Which are the markets which you are excited about in terms of new entry, and which are some other markets where you want to further double down? Yeah. For example, I saw that Bangalore, you are pretty bullish about Bangalore as a market.
Yeah. So the way we look at that way is that we would want to grow deeper in an existing geography. That is one thing, like you said, go bullish about a particular town or a city. Then expand into newer areas where underserved population is there. That is the two-pronged approach that we have. And then, of course, you superimpose the greenfield and a brownfield strategy, so that you have 4 cuts available. How do you want to look at it? Bangalore is our home market, and we have 10 hospitals now. We have 3 more coming up. In the next 1 year, we will commission 3 more hospitals in Bangalore. First of them would go on stream in April of 2025, 4 months from now. So that is going deeper into an existing geography that we have. East, the pursuit of acquisitions in the East is from a belief that we had that, not like I talked about, underserved geographies. East always had people traveling out of that region to, South predominantly. For medical care, and we felt there is no need.
Some 15 years ago, everyone from East, so I come from East India, people used to come to CMC Vellore or to AIIMS or to Chandigarh.
Our Manipal Hospital, Bangalore, the hospital next door to us, sees about 10-12% of its outpatients every day from East. And the point is, if we have a Manipal Hospital in Kolkata, people can avoid this travel. If people are preferring a brand, people can avoid this travel. And the other thing that we need to keep in mind is when a patient travels from Calcutta to Bangalore, it's 3 other family members who come along. So the cost is high. If the patient is admitted, they stay outside. So the cost of treatment is not really what the patient pays her bill at the hospital. It's a much larger sum. So I think it is also important to educate about that and ensure that more and more people are treated closer to where they are. And we therefore always felt East is an underserved area. And while Manipal is a brand name to be established there, created there, we felt that is something that we should really pursue. And hence both MRA and Medica. And now we are the largest hospital group in the Eastern region. We are there in Bhubaneswar. We are there in Calcutta, of course, with 5 hospitals. We are there in Ranchi. We are there in Siliguri. We are there in Bangalore. So
Raipur as well, right?
And Raipur, and central area. Yes, that's right. Raipur is under construction.
Dilip, after COVID, it make absolute sense for a well-funded platform like yours to acquire asset, because there was a period when acquisition was much cheaper than replacement cost. Yeah. So you would spend 1.5 crore at least per bed. You're right. And you will end up spending 4 years to achieve 50-60% occupancy. Yeah. Whereas assets were available in the market at much lower than that. Yeah. Is that still true as the competition is getting heated up for acquiring these limited few assets?
Yeah, you are right. A number of available assets are fewer now. Particularly if you look at the chain of hospitals, hardly anything is left in the country, which is for acquisition, unless the next cycle of, exits come through, that, some chains which are owned by private equities, going through this buyouts again, right? So, At this point, I think we don't have too many viable options of chains getting acquired. But then there are standalone hospitals, good standalone hospitals in geographies of interest which are available. Like you talked about, COVID is an important landmark. Uh, Financially, it hit the standalone hospitals the most. People like us had the balance sheet ability to absorb these shocks, but standalone hospitals really did not have that. So you would have seen this consolidation, post COVID, it's really picked up pace. There are many where maybe doctor family have come together, or a group of friends have come together, set up a 200 to 50 bedded hospital, realize that they don't have working capital to really run it. Any vehicle takes 14, 15, 16 months to break even. That, till then you're pouring in cash. Lot of, it would seem astonishing that, people are putting 300, 400 crores, have not really thought about the working capital. And, you have seen hospitals which are just belly up because of that. So we have the option of finding these standalone assets. And that's something that we would continue to pursue. Change has and when they become available, if they are in geographies of interest, that we would continue to look at. From our perspective, that we would want to be present in Hyderabad if that's an opportunity. We would like Vizag to be an option for us. We have a very good hospital in Vijayawada. We have a very good hospital in Bhubaneswar. Vizag is in between. Hyderabad is again a market very similar to Bangalore. Floating population, people who are aware of their healthcare needs, insurance driven, and so a good corporate facility with outcomes and service could do well there. So the point that you made about greenfields and brownfields is very, very important. That greenfields gives us ability to construct exactly what we want. Brownfields are by nature opportunistic, and at times you may have to compromise on what is available versus what exactly you would want. But then it gives you quicker access to a market. So we have looked at brownfields as an option to get into a new geography. Saves us the time of setting it up, and greenfields as an option of going deeper into a geography. That is broadly how we have looked.
And there is also a difference in strategy among the larger chains when it comes to opening new markets.
Yeah.
There is a strategy by players like Medanta wherein they have expanded beyond these metros to smaller cities as well, like Ranchi, Jamshedpur, etc. But there is another school of thought wherein the second or the third largest chain probably is only concentrated around metros. The idea being that RPOP drops significantly in tier 2 and tier 3, and in comparison, the costs on the Capex doesn't drop by the same level. Which side of this debate are you on?
I would think we cannot ignore the story of the tier 2, tier 3. That, there is affordability. You're right about the ability to price higher in an appropriate kind of a thing. But then tier 2, tier 3, there is affordability, and you could build a legacy for yourself in terms of customers who would stick to you. You go into a Raipur, deliver good quality there, have good doctors, good outcomes, and for that region, you would continue to be a relevant player. That somebody coming in new is unlikely to sort of win away too many of the patients who have had good experience with you. So I don't think you need a mix of both. Your challenges are different. In a metro, you would find doctors, find managers, find nurses. When you go to a tier 2, tier 3, your challenge is not really putting the infrastructure, finding people to come and work there, because it is an ecosystem. Schools, clubs, schools, social infrastructure, all that come into play. So the good thing is, when you are a large network, you have the ability to move people around. You have the ability to tell somebody, you work in tier 3 for 2-3 years, I would then bring you back to one of our tier 1 location hospitals. That's a ability you have as a large network. So you need to have this sort of purposeful approach to both. But I would think you need to have a mix because you can't ignore the demand that exists in tier 2 and then say I would only focus in metro. The economic realities of metro, the external pressures of metro, everything is different. So I would think you need to have eggs in all the baskets.
And as you are looking to grow your platform in terms, let's say, number of beds, there can be four possible strategies. Of course, going all in and let's say building and operating assets on your balance sheet. Then there can be a leased model. Then there can be a management contract model. And finally, there can be a franchise model where you are you're lending your brand name and ensuring some level of SOPs being followed while a local, let's say, entrepreneur runs the asset. Which of these are you adopting? All four? Which of these?
One thing I would completely rule out is the franchisee model.
Because you lose control.
Yeah, and we should realize the most important asset that we have is our people and our brand. That and that is what is propelling us ahead. So I can't really think of a situation where we don't have our people on the ground and we are still putting our brand there. So much as we could say SOPs are central and purchase procedures are central or operating costs are central. Till the time we are clinically and managerially in control of the location, we don't want to put a brand there. So no franchisee model. So that is our. We are not looked at O&M aggressively. I know there are opportunities. We are not explored it much because we believe the effort that you really need to put in to run an O&M, because you have to really believe it's a Manipal hospital and run an O&M. And then the same effort goes into running your own hospitals, you do much better. So maybe if an O&M with an option to buy it 5 years later,
Basis milestone.
was a basic milestone, that is where you have a long-term ownership in place, or long-term where the P&L actually sits with you, not a management fee. That makes more sense to me, more bang for your effort that you're putting in. So therefore, what we are focusing on is the greenfields, and even in greenfields, somebody else builds the facility for us. We don't invest in land and building. So people, landowners or builders actually create hospitals for our specs, and we take it for 30 years plus, kind of lease. So that is a greenfield that we have. So our capital is better utilized in what we are good at. Lease is again something that we have looked at, but again the preferences, our ability to buy it out later, so that we can then modify the building, retrofit as required. The challenge in brownfield is, like I mentioned earlier, oftentimes you don't get exactly what you need. You don't want to have a compromised facility wearing your brand, because for a patient walking into a Manipal hospital, whether that is leased or O&M or owned, they would not know. They are coming to Manipal. They are seeing the logo on our shirts. So our deliverables to the patient does not change in the three situations. So therefore, we need to tailor our strategy accordingly.
Sure. In metros or in markets where you compete with some of your peers, comparable size, larger hospital chains, what's your differentiated USP that helps you stand out compared to other hospitals?
I think what we've been focusing a lot in the last few years is on our service delivery. That frankly, that if you go to different corporate hospitals, you would possibly see the technologies are similar. That it's the same 4 or 5 companies which sell medical equipment to us. Technologies are fairly similar. Now, corporate hospital would take a doctor who's really unfit to do the kind of work. There is a sound credentialing privilege process that hospitals follow. There could be minor tweaks that you have fairly decently qualified hospitals. You might have a star in one versus a very well known or reputed person one versus other. So to my mind, the differentiator would have to be, a lot of people when they come to a Manipal hospital would know they'll get their clinical issue with depth fit, that they would get cured of the issue that they're coming to us for. Therefore, the differential to my mind need to be the service, the softer side of the hospital. That what is the experience they feel in the hospital outside of the clinical paradigm. How are they dealt with? How are they talked to? How the families handle? what kind of responses, what kind of other interface, for example, people who call us, who reach us on the app, on the web, what is our response? How do we handle? I think this softer aspect would make a difference. All of us, people who come to us is a cross section of the society. That what we expect in terms of service from an airline, a hotel, a restaurant, an online store. I think there are expectations of service standards that all of us have, turnaround time standards that we all have. I think it is about meeting those expectations and staying ahead of that. I know that would be, to my mind, a big decision, and we've been working.
What we have also seen in, of course, now there are 5 or 6 larger hospital chains, but one clear difference between you guys versus a few other chains are that in the initial days, or even now, in two specific examples, the brand of the clinician promoter is probably as big or bigger than the brand of the chain itself. Of course, it would have its own set of pros and cons. It is reflected in the revenue mix. So let's say a cardiac specialty contributing to 40-50% of the hospital's revenue. But the advantage is that hospital till a very long period of time has been able to piggyback on the brand of the promoter. Why don't you dissect this for us?
It's a great question that, it's something that we have debated many times. It becomes very relevant every time we launch a Greenfield hospital. For example, when we launch a Greenfield hospital, the faster it gets into a break-even, the less drain on us. That's a very obvious economic statement. Now, if you select, when you add doctors to that hospital, when you're putting the startup clinical team, like you said, if you are able to get a big name to come on board, maybe with a large practice, it gives a jump start to that facility, and it would then get you to the revenue that you need to break even quicker. But the flip of that is, a lot of times, and I don't mean anything like that, a lot of times, several of these big names come with their own practice idea that, how we would want to run the department, or I would come with this team of 15 people, and, my friend would come in that department. So it would become, we had then ramifications of that outside of that department in the whole process of running the hospital, in terms of formularies that we would want to use, the formulary kind of disciplines that we would want to use, the kind of billing practices that we would want to do, which is centrally the same in the Manipal system. So when you look at what you might possibly compromise, I'm not saying it happens with everybody or every name, but sometimes the accommodation that you might be asked to make goes against the ethos that we talked about, and we can't do something for one person in a hospital and say that same approach is not available elsewhere. So we have chosen always to get good doctors on board, who are clinically very sound, who approach to patients patients really, really comes through. And then we believe the brand and the hospital team would pull in the patients, So we still do think that works, that works. It may take 4 months longer for that hospital to break even, but in the now hospital is built for 1 year or 5 years, we are looking at a 20, 30, 40-year life hospital. So setting the right practice at the beginning, I believe, is very important.
So it's pretty much a trade-off between near-term jump in your revenue versus a long-term, more sustainable approach.
There are certain practices which are non-viable. What a patient would undergo or would experience, whichever Manipal hospital he or she goes to. So anything which is contrary to that, anything which allows, does not allow us to follow that, I think is avoidable. So whether it is a doctor, whether it is a particular kind of maybe a tie-up, a marketing practice, I think some of these things we have to stick to one policy.
While I was researching about you, I read your statement wherein you have mentioned that the most ideal format of a hospital for you is a 250 bed to 300 bed hospital, and the era of 700 big boxes hospitals is almost gone. Why don't you educate our viewers more about this insight?
The hospitals have to deal with what we call micro markets. None of us as a consumer would want to drive for more than or travel for more than 20, 30 minutes to get to a hospital, unless it is a destination for a liver transplant, a complex oncosurgery, and something of that kind. If you look at our 10 hospitals in Bangalore, all of them are capable of doing most things. Maybe one or two very niche stuff does not happen in maybe 4 or 5 of the hospitals. So therefore, the micro market orientation is important. That people have community, neighborhood, and 20, 30 minutes kind of arrival distance. So when you look at that, when you look at a catchment, what is the population that you have at catchment, and therefore looking at morbidity and similar pattern, what is the size that you would need in terms of number of beds? Because these days you are also sending people home quicker. In Manipal, our average length of stay is below 3. Despite the complex work that we do, quaternary work that we do, an average patient stays at with us less than 3 days. It used to be 4, 4.5, maybe 7, 8 years ago. This is also making beds more efficient. That fewer number of beds we are now seeing more patients in them. So therefore, we don't need, if you look at the micro market, which has got 20, 30 lakh people, we don't need more than 200, 250 beds. The second thing is, the large boxes also comes in with its own challenges, parking, cleanliness, food delivery, your ability to really give top-end service to the patient. It, to my mind, suffers a bit. Maybe not a clinical service, but the ancillary service that I talked about, suffers a bit when you have the large boxes. And even individual attention a manager can give to a team. Your op structure for us is 1+6. Now, what I mean is, there is a hospital director, there are 6 direct reports to them. Whether you are a 700-bedded hospital or a 50-bedded hospital, is 1+6. The experience of this 1+6 profile is that the profiles of this 1+6 will be different. That you may have a chartered accountant with 15 years as a finance head in a large hospital. You may have a fresh CA in a smaller hospital. So, but the team size below that, if you look at an average of 5 people per bed, a 700-bedded hospital would have, say, 3,500 people. Again, the one bed is 1+6. And, and of course, a smaller hospital would have a smaller number of people. So the attention, the teamwork, everything also, I believe, suffers a bit when you look at large boxes,
So I'm assuming as you expand and look at acquiring more assets or build grounds up, you ideally won't want to deviate a lot more than this 250 or 300, because then you will have to build the entire playbook from fresh. 1+6 will become probably 2+9 or something else. Is that a fair assumption?
So which is fair. So, but then we don't want to play around with this 1+6, because our processes, everything is sort of set according to that. So therefore, even in a large hospital, now we have this 1+6 model. What we do is maybe support them with more people, at a level below. But every greenfield that we are building, like I said, greenfield gives us an opportunity to construct exactly what we want, design exactly what we want. The 3 greenfields which are coming up in Bangalore, all are identical. The shades of the hospital may be different looking at the plot of it, but in terms of bed capacity, the clinical program, they are identical. So that's a cookie cutter that we have. But if you have to go out and acquire a hospital, something becomes, I talked about, Hyderabad being a market of interest to us, geography of interest to us. If we sort of are adamant that I only want a 250-bedded brownfield in Hyderabad, we are significantly narrowing down the universe that we could approach. So there, if something becomes available, let's say 500 beds, we have to look at it and see how do we consciously go in and sort of anticipate some of the problems and deal with it, So I think brownfields, like I originally said, makes us accept certain compromises. But I would hope those are not the fundamental stuff that we hold very dear.
One very peculiar aspect of running a hospital is that while people sitting on the outside may perceive as similar to a consumer business, because you are directly delivering a service to consumer and you are marketing directly to consumer. Yeah. But this is very peculiar in a sense that there is a very heavy upfront capex involved. Yeah. And then subsequently, even 60 to 70%, depending upon some design choices, 60 to 70% of your variable cost can also be fixed, which means whether you service 0 patients in a day or 100 patients in a day, your cost won't go up. Basis that we have seen very interesting examples in the industry. For example, the third largest hospital chain does same amount of profit as the largest hospital chain, Apollo, and it was because of those design choices of, let's say, getting away, chopping out the inefficient lobbies, not investing into too much into the highest end machines, because the capex versus the incremental difference in patient outcome or revenue was not making sense. Uh, do you have some such anecdotes from your operating profile to share with us?
For us, and I always thought, and as a team in Manipal, we think we should have a volume-led growth. See, we should treat more and more number of patients, and to our mind, that's a more sustainable model. That we have, for example, shunned price increases for several years now. That there is no annual first April price increase kind of a thing which will happen every now and then. If something is really, our cost is really going up somewhere, we will adjust. Otherwise, we have tried out a volume-led growth, and we will be growing at 12% or so in terms of footfalls in a year. So that is, to our mind, more sustainable. And imagine that hospital is a sector which is susceptible to price controls. We saw it during COVID.
Recently, there was a comment by the courts, and then there was a bloodbath in the hospital stocks. That did not happen actually, but yeah.
I'd say, education and health is considered to be social sectors. Like I'm saying, you do have, while you have a economic objective, you have a very strong social objective too. People pursue a very strong social objective. So therefore, if we sort of tailor ourselves to a model which is price driven, I'm not commenting on anybody else's thought on it. In my belief is that if we tailor ourselves to a model which is price driven, we are susceptible to these additional pressures. So therefore, volume driven, and you give value for money, and you are perceived as value for money, and you give right outcomes. You develop a brand which is soft in the ethos. Develop a brand which is perceived as part in the right place. I think those are important in the healthcare sector, and that is what we would want to pursue. That patient-centric, volume-driven model, to my mind, is more robust, more resilient than purely a efficiency and price driven. But then this does not take away the need for efficiency, but you can still deliver efficiency, low price, and still be successful commercially.
Dilip, we have also seen that some of your peers, Apollo is a classic example where they have a very diversified revenue stream. Outside running multi-specialty hospitals, they are practically trying to capture a much larger pie of all ancillary revenue streams that are possible, be it diagnostic, be it pharmacies, be it home care. What's your take on that? Do you want to remain focused on hospitals with the belief that there is enough headroom for your platform to grow here, or are there plans to enter into other?
In fact, we have had this question from others too. The skill sets that you need to run these different verticals, to my mind, are very different. Because you are a successful hospital manager does not necessarily make you a successful diagnostics business manager. That challenges are very different. To my mind, diagnostics are quite a lot about logistics. That collecting samples, turnaround time. You do centralized automated kind of processes in most of the cases. A lot of the time, it is about how efficient you are in your collection, diagnostic, and reporting back. So therefore, as Manipal, we believe we are good in our clinical areas. We give good clinical outcomes. We are focused on tertiary and quaternary care. And like you said, there is enough to do in this. To my mind, venturing into adjacencies, while it could theoretically look attractive, we talk about synergies and cross, referring and cross-selling and all that. I think it's good to remain focused on what you have done well, And then if there is enough headroom, I know you are able to get a 15-18% kind of a growth, then, that's a good path to be into. I'm not sort of disputing any other strategy others may have, but I believe this is a good alternative to follow too, is what I would say.
And we still have a lot less number of beds compared to what we need.
Yes.
And with incomes rising, with more cases of let's say aging population, chronic cases going up, I think there's plenty of headroom even for a like pure play hospital play. We often talk about the fact that India is a underserved country in terms of health insurance. I have a very interesting observation. The hospital chains which have a pair profile skewed towards out of pocket expenses typically have better margins, whereas the hospitals more dependent on not only commercial insurance but especially let's say CGCS or GIPSA, where the rates can go as low as half. What's your take on it? Higher penetration, is it good for your bottom line? Is it bad for your bottom line?
You would, again, I would say you would need to have a mix. You would need to have, because uh, an insurance type gives you volumes. You can't assume volumes from out of pocket. They are individual walk-ins. So you would need a mix. Whether it is schemes or PPA kind of type, you would need to get that done.
Because there is a very high fixed cost. So first,
That's right. So you would see, many hospitals when they are starting up, because like you said, fixed costs and, you have bed available. I'll pick up any schemes or any patient is giving maybe marginal costing basis, it makes something. But then as we mature, that, 6 or 7 years, I think it is good to have a mix of both, because PPAs and schemes would give you a steady flow, and if you continue to deal with them well, if your outcomes and practice are good, and if your billing practice and your dealings are transparent, there's no need for them to go off you anytime. That's a very long-term, consistent kind of a flow that you would have. At the same time, as you build reputation, your doctors, get recognized for the work. Word of mouth spreads. You also get the steady flow of this, out of pocket kind of people coming into you. Then you are in a good place. That, I think that is what I have observed. Not only in Manipal, outside too. You can't be only for one or the other. I think you would need to have a mix, and that mix make a lot of sense.
running a hospital, I would say, is very similar to running an airline, because below 60-70% occupancy, there's no way you can generate a rupee of a profit, and you actually make money on the last 20% of the seats. The only difference being that what's fuel cost for airline is probably payroll cost for you. Let's double click on this point. If manpower is the biggest, let's say, recurring cost line item, one would assume that your input cost, the raw material, is actually humans. You come from Kerala, a place which is known for, let's say, giving the best healthcare professionals to the country. As you aggressively scale, as the industry also becomes organized, do you think we have built enough capacity on the education pipeline side to support this rapid expansion growth of the providers?
If you look at us aggregate, no. If you look at all the statistics, we are about at about half the number of professionals that we ought to have, whether nurses or doctors, as a country. But then, if you look at region-wise, you are better off in certain regions. But the point there is, right, that the rural-urban skew that we talked about earlier. In cities, you will find your doctors and your nurses. When you want to go to a tier 3, like I mentioned earlier, that's where you would find that, it is difficult to attract people. So therefore, at an macro level, we are certainly short-staffed, in terms of skill set. We don't have enough doctors, we don't have enough nurses. But as an individual hospital, does Manipal face that challenge? No, because we do attract doctors, we do attract nurses. And the challenges would be for people in tier 2, tier 3, maybe standalone hospitals, because we also have to ensure that we pay them a fair salary. As people in all our geographies, wherever we operate, we would ensure that our nurses are paid the highest. The fact is, while we may still lose them to Europe or US, we will not lose them to another hospital. That is something that we ensure. So it's not a challenge for, maybe not for Manipal, not for any of the large organized players, but for the sector it's a challenge.
And I think that's the power of a platform versus a standalone hospital, because you can, like aviation at some point of time came up with their own academies, or ITS came up with their own skilling program, while colleges existed, but quality and consistency was an issue. So as a platform, you can make the investments in doing all that, but a standalone hospital won't be able to.
Exactly. And that's the point I made earlier, that, when we start a hospital in a tier 3 town, we could get people there and say, look, work for 3 years, I will get you to a Delhi or a Bangalore or a Pune or a Calcutta later, up to 3 years. So there is a conviction that, look, you have a network and you can move people around. So this is right. But for somebody starting a hospital in Northwest Rajasthan, and as an example, finding doctors and nurses is going to be rare.
So Dilip, let's discuss what does the future hold for MHEPL. And my first question is regarding going public. The last time the price determination happened, a lot has happened since then. First, at a macro level, the public market is at all-time high. There are mouth-watering valuations, especially that healthcare stocks are getting. And for asset like yours, A, there's a scarcity premium. B, you have swelled up a lot in terms of number of beds in the last 4 years. Makes us believe that probably there could not be a better time to go public. What's your take on that?
It is certainly an option that we have, that, and people are pointed it out to us for some time now, that, why aren't you public? One thing we need to have internal clarity on is, what is the purpose of going public? That, I don't think we have any sellers in our cap table at this point. So it is not a secondary market, secondary kind of sale that will happen. And if it's fundraise, we would also need to have a good use for that. What is that we are telling the investors, investing public, as to what are we going to do with the money. So I think that is something certainly in our minds, that this is an option available to us. Like you said, healthcare stocks are doing well, but then we would need to get it right in terms of the use that we would put it to. And we need to weigh that against the demands of a listed entity. I'm not talking in terms of governance. I think even though we are unlisted, in a lot of our governance practices, we conduct ourselves like we are listed. The quarter-on-quarter kind of pressures that you might have, whether the long-term views, long-term bets that you would want to take as an entity, would everybody fully appreciate that? I think that is important. When we have a set of investors who've been with us for long and who understand the sector well, understand the company well, we could take calls on investing money which is for the medium term. 3 years out, 5 years out, it would really make an impact for the whole group. When we are listed and when we have a large number of investors that and when we have an obligation to the stock price and expectations, the burden of expectations that we would carry, I wonder at times whether our ability to take long-term, medium-term, long-term strategic calls would get impacted. So that is something that we'll have to keep in mind. The first thing, of course, is what are we going to do the listing for?
You made a very fair point about the market doing a daily appraisal, or the stock market doing a daily appraisal of publicly listed company. And off the camera, we were also discussing how in your monthly business reviews, you keep the P&L slide at the end of it. Yeah. You focus more on the methods rather than the outcome to begin with. How much of the decision of staying private determined by that as well, so that you have enough headroom to make the right long-term sustainable decisions for the company?
I think eventually it has to be a mix of all this. That we should be able to continue to do all the right things we have been doing. We should also do the right things for our investors. That I think they have their aspirations and their own plans. So we would need to find a mix, and the right timing of it. So we are very cognizant of that, and we are, and the biggest thing is that listing should not change the fundamentals of the company. That what Manipal Hospitals is and what we are, what we really stand for. That should not in any way get impacted by a decision to list. I think that's a very important consideration too. I'm not saying that, a lot of very good healthcare companies have gone public. So it is not to say that, anything dramatically negative happens. But I think it's a decision that you can't reverse, right? I'm saying, in most cases,
In normal cases, you can't reverse
you
it,
can't reverse.
Yeah.
Therefore, getting into it with eyes open, is a good thing to do.
We know how innovation and technology is changing the whole world, and healthcare is no different. How are you evolving as a group with, let's say, adopting innovation and new technology? While researching on your group, I of course came around some very striking example. For example, how technology has been able to drastically bring down the discharge time in our hospitals. We would love to understand what are some of the areas where you are implementing AI and new technology, and how is it impacting patient outcomes and your metrics?
If you look at, AI, we are possibly one of the earliest adopters of monitoring systems which can predict a patient who's likely to, escalate into an ICU kind of a situation. And now, a lot of the time, I just step back for a minute and say, a lot of the time, patients are admitted in ICU for the sake of monitoring, not only for a very intense active therapy, for intense monitoring, and we have figured out that ICU beds can be better utilized for patients who really need intensive therapy and less of monitoring. And if you are able to ship them out to a normal kind of a ward and have a system in place which will actively track them and alert us if in advance if something is deteriorating, we are able to reduce costs for the patient and also improve the utilization of ICU for the right kind of patients who require it. So we have, for example, the iSenses patient monitoring system. They call it patient status engine (PSE). Wirelessly monitors several parameters of a patient and then alerts a doctor, the treating doctor on the mobile, if anything is. With all the data that the system is capturing, is the system predicting an adverse event? No, it helps. So that's a good example that I can quote. We are extensively use digital technologies in the hospital operations that ensuring that the doctors, for example, need not write a prescription. That are people who are really used to writing a prescription. We have a system where it is captured from written to system and then it is used. The benefit is that patients are not carrying papers around, and the doctor's advice is straight away relayed to the respective lab or radiology or the pharmacy. The queuing times are less. Or nursing handover, when a nurse changes shift and the incoming nurse comes in, they spend maybe half an hour handing over the patient, that explaining that about each patient. We have introduced AI there to reduce the time of handover so that nursing time is more productively used. So we believe we are just about starting using AI to run the images as a layer, the radiology images as a layer, and to highlight areas to the doctor to determine what is required. So we believe that we should be ahead of the curve on technology, and Manipal has been spending a lot on technology. We probably are one of the rare hospital groups, maybe the only hospital group where our patient can move from one hospital to another and everything moves seamlessly. That suppose you are at a hospital in Delhi yesterday, you are today in Bangalore, you are taken an X-ray yesterday, you want to follow with another doctor in Bangalore, your X-ray is available in Bangalore, only your records are available in Bangalore. So it's expensive to implement that, but we believe that, from a safety point of view, patient safety and other parameters, it helps us. So we've been continuously investing in technology. We'll continue to do that. We believe healthcare, benefits from, adoption of technology, even we found it during COVID that, a lot of the technology which we sort of repurposed during COVID was nothing to do with healthcare originally. I think we have to be open to that.
Sure. What's very striking about this whole conversation to me personally was that you are not casting your net very wide and shallow, but you are focusing on what's very core to you as a let's say capability, which is running hospitals, not diversifying into multiple uh, segments, allied segment where the playbook may be very different in markets that you don't understand. Does this approach hold true even for geographical diversification, let's say going out of India? I know on the education side, at least the Manipal has a very significant out of India presence. Uh, is that in your plans, near-term plans?
No, we don't want to go out of India. In fact, we are at one hospital in Kuala Lumpur, which we sold a few years ago. That hospital are doing very well, but we sold it because we thought we would want to focus in India. One standalone hospital in Kuala Lumpur was not really changing anything that, even though that facility was doing very well. So we think India's got tremendous potential. There is no need to go out of India. And, you are right. Every other week, we get an incoming from other parts of the world that, about franchising operations at times, taking over hospitals, co-investing, Africa as an example, Middle East as an example, Far East as an example, that, where people look at, healthcare chains like Manipal to come and run hospitals there. But ecosystems are different. Like you said, I think we are very focused in India. Our capabilities are very aligned to the needs of Indian customers. It is not to say that we can't adopt it or, repurpose it for a foreign country or a foreign customer. But I think so much of work still needs to be done in India. Why divert your attention elsewhere is how I would think about it.
Let's do a rapid fire.
Sure.
So whatever comes to your mind first, short answers.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do when you start your workday?
I sit on my laptop and open my emails.
To aspiring leaders, entrepreneurs watching the show, what is that one book or podcast, aside from our podcast, what is that one book or podcast that you would recommend?
No, I would not want to recommend one book. What I would say, I know you wondered about quick answer, but I would say be open about reading up anything, open about any opportunity to learn. I would not, because what you learn from one book, after 5 years later, you might find another book which completely trashes whatever you learned from this or gives you a completely different approach to that same issue. So I would say take inputs from whatever sources that you have and, people, podcast, anything else, interpersonal interactions and absorb what you think is relevant for you. That's what I would want to say.
What is the best piece of advice that you have received, professional advice that you have received in your career?
That manager's life is not black and white. Oftentimes, most of the time, we have to deal with Grace. A former manager of mine, a boss of mine, told several years ago, and I remember it every now and then. That it is so true.
If you weren't in this industry and in this role, what were you most probably be doing?
I would have been a CFO of a company.
What's your stress buster or your hobby?
I watch animal videos on YouTube. That mostly videos about cats and dogs doing funny things, or about pets. That is something I do. I watch videos about houses. That people designing houses, building houses. That's the stress buster. I walk. 3 things. These are the 3 stress busters.
By the way, are you a pet owner as well?
I take care of a stray. I'll talk about my wife and I, Anu and I, take care of a stray cat. She's no longer a stray. She owns this at this point. It's not that way.
What's one business leader or a personality that inspires you the most?
I think Ratan Tata, what he stood for, all the right things, the group, what Tata Group, essentially, he epitomized what we all think about the Tata Group, right? I think the values, the core values, the systems, the people focus that they have, I think, the whole ethos of that group, I think that really starts up.
There's a generation of super successful healthcare leaders like you and Vishal. But in the next generation, who is that one young healthcare leader to watch out for?
We have many. I would not want to. Even in the Manipal system, we will have a dozen very bright. If I look at what I was in their age, and I was nowhere near their capabilities. So it's not certainly not one. There are, if you look at the sector, there are a few, maybe close to 100, and they are all required. I know the sector is so critical; they are all required. So good luck to all of it.
What's your take on the 70-hour work week?
Uh, 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 it should come from within. I think it's not really about what you mandate as work week. It's about whether people really work or not. I think you are not trying to get people to spend time in the confines of your office. Like, I think they should contribute. So I would really leave it to people to decide what is appropriate for their. I myself don't work for 70 hours a week. What I could tell you that too.
What is that one thing on your personal to-do list that has been there unchecked for the longest period of time?
Unchecked meaning that
you haven't done it so far, yeah.
Not travel as often as I would want to. My wife and I love traveling. We have sort of come down to once a year. That is nowhere near what we want to.
Thank you so much for appearing on the show, Dilip. It was great talking to you, and especially budding leaders watching this show. I am sure they have a lot to learn. But before we let you go, I have one final question for you. I asked this question to your friend Vishal as well. What's that ideal image in your mind about your legacy whenever you hang your boots? What would be your legacy in healthcare? Do you have an ideal image in mind by the time, or are there any milestones that you would want to meet before?
No, I have no milestone in terms of size of the company or anything of the kind.
Or anything in terms of personal impact of the work that you do, personal accomplishments.
I would only hope that when I leave, people will remember me as a person who put our beings first. That I believe that healthcare is all about the people. We are a 30,000 strong organization in Manipal, and it's all about team. Nobody comes to Manipal Hospital because I'm the CEO. That is, no patient comes to Manipal Hospital because Dilip is the CEO. They come for our front end, that our care, our service at the front end. So it's all about people, and I hope they would the people would remember me as a person who put the teams there.
Great. Those insights were very, very inspiring. Thank you for coming on the show, Dilip.
My pleasure, Vivek, and thank you very much for having me.